Our top story: battles rage in Gaza as the Israeli military says it's expanded military operations and its forces are still in the field. The army entered northern Gaza overnight as its fighter jets struck 150 targets. The sites hit included tunnels and underground combat spaces. The military also said one raid had killed the head of Hamas's area array who helped plan the October 7th attack. Meanwhile, Israel says they are broadening humanitarian efforts and would allow trucks carrying food, water, and medicine to enter southern Gaza today. And in Gaza, 2 large explosions have been seen as Israel knocked out communications via airstrikes and artillery fire. Hamas pledged to confront the Israeli attacks with full force. And the group also says a ceasefire is required for the release of hostages. For the very latest, we can go live to our correspondent Sarah Coates in Tel Aviv and Joe Dashin in Sderot, Israel. Good to see you both, Sarah. Let me start with Sarah first. Sarah, Gaza is experiencing a telecommunications service right now. We are still trying to get to our correspondent on the ground, but talk to us about situation on your side. We understand intense fighting overnight. Is this the long-promised ground offensive, all-out ground offensive Israel has been mentioning?
Well, look, hi, I'm just going to step away from the camera and inside for a minute. You can hear these sirens blaring out. These are these air raid sirens. I'm just stepping away from the glass here. They have just started in the last minute. No sirens here in Tel Aviv for around 12 hours. I just do need to step away from the glass. I just looked at my air raid alert app, which says they are here in the area where I am. Okay, in a second you should hear some very loud booms. Hopefully for the people here in Tel Aviv, the Iron Dome missile defense system. There we go. There's one loud boom. Hopefully an interception by the Iron Dome there. All right, I'm going to step back out. This is not really a general occurrence here in Tel Aviv, air raid sirens going off. People in the southern communities of Israel are very, very used to it. They have about 7 seconds when these sirens go off to get to a shelter here in Tel Aviv. That's why I was able to wait a little bit longer before I went inside. We have 1.5 minutes when these sirens ring out to actually move inside. There's another loud boom. I'm not sure if my microphone picked that up. But look, Israel has really been bombarded by rockets sent over from the coastal enclave, from the Gaza Strip, since the beginning of this war, which started on the 7th of this month. Thousands upon thousands of rockets have been flown over from the Strip by Hamas militants, a number of them hitting residential buildings. We saw one residential building here in Israel, not far from where I am in Tel Aviv, hit yesterday. A number of people have been injured. I'm now hearing sirens going off from these medical crews and also another loud bang. So look, it is certainly a very, very tense situation on the ground. It's a weekend here, of course. People are out and about, normally enjoying their weekend, but it's pretty much like a ghost town. I'm barely seeing any people out on the streets, barely any cars driving along this very busy coastal road just behind me. As I said, very, very worrying. And look, what we're hearing from the Israeli Defense Forces is that it still has soldiers in the Gaza Strip, tanks in the Gaza Strip. It's just released pictures coming out there. It says it is continuing to strike Hamas infrastructure in the Strip. It says overnight it took out 150 targets, it says, with these terror tunnels that the IDF says is used by Hamas to hide fighters, to hide weapons. Now, we have seen this incursion already into the Strip. It could be the fact that this is a progression of these limited incursions that the IDF has been carrying out over the last few nights to really test the ground, have a look at what they're dealing with and test the capabilities of Hamas fighters in the Gaza Strip. Also, it could be a prelude. We've just heard those sirens, a prelude of what is to be expected in the coming hours and in the coming days. But look, it is certainly, as I said, a very tense situation here in Israel, and also, of course, for these people in the Gaza Strip who have basically lost all telecommunications. We are hearing from aid groups and workers down in the Strip, also journalists, that they can barely make phone calls and cannot contact their loved ones. So look, it's a horrendous situation all around.
Yeah, we did pick up several loud booms, and we just heard siren, air raid siren went off. Can you just describe to us a little bit about what you were able to see around you that is not captured on camera? Were you able to see explosions? Were the rockets successful to hit any targets, or were they being intercepted? What can you see?
Look, I'm not hearing any immediate talk of any casualties or any destruction. That should come out in the next few minutes. But generally what we see, and I've seen a lot of it in this sky behind me. I was standing out on this balcony the other day, and a huge part of a projectile actually fell right there between those two buildings into the sea, a huge splash coming up. But if I went to the other side of this apartment building where I am now, so this way is north. That way, which I'm facing toward, is the south. So if you go to the other windows over there, the south is obviously where the Gaza Strip is. You can generally see the projectiles coming up from the Iron Dome missile defense system. So this is a defense system that basically uses a rocket which blasts these other rockets that are sent by Hamas or sent by other militant groups from the Gaza Strip. It blasts them out of the sky. So you'll usually see when the IDF has been launched, when the Iron Dome, I should say rather, has been launched, you'll see a sort of a squiggly trail and then a small cloud up in the sky. This is where the interception has happened. And look, let me tell you, I have seen a lot of these clouds since I've been here. As I said, thousands upon thousands of rockets have been sent over from Hamas militants in the Gaza Strip into Israeli territory. And look, while a lot of people aren't actually injured by direct hits or being in their homes when their homes are hit, a lot of people are actually injured running to shelter. A lot of people are treated for things like PTSD. They fall over, they may break their leg or other injuries like that. While some people are also wounded from the shrapnel. We need to remember that this is a rocket hitting another rocket. So of course, when these interceptions do happen, there will be shrapnel falling all out of the sky. And that is why I moved inside there, because if there was an interception up above me or just behind me, you don't know where this shrapnel will go. And this is why I stood away from the camera. I moved back inside the room, because if this shrapnel, of course, hits glass that is all around me, then that could cause a lot of damage. Now, most buildings in Tel Aviv and right around Israel do have these bomb shelters. We have many in this building, but a lot of the older buildings simply do not have them. I know many people who are very worried right now, or moving to friends and relatives' places, because they are very unsafe in their homes. And this is just due to the amount of rockets that have been sent over from the Strip, and also due to these interceptions. Yeah,
the conditions there are making things extremely difficult for journalists to do their reporting. Also, Sarah, Israel's military says it had stopped a surface-to-air missile fired from Lebanon. What do we know about that?
Certainly. Well, the IDF has just released pictures of strikes against a Hezbollah position in southern Lebanon, responding to this launch, this surface-to-air launch targeting a drone that was allegedly sent over by Hezbollah militants. Now, look, this is very, very concerning, just given how many people have been coming here to Israel, diplomats, and how much fear there is over a potential regional spillover. What we've been seeing over the last 3 weeks is continued skirmishes on the Israel-Lebanon border between the IDF and also Hezbollah militants. We've also seen the US striking a number of targets inside eastern Syria. That was late yesterday, or early yesterday rather, I should say. This is after it says that Iranian-based proxies attacked a number of US personnel in certain areas around the Middle East. Also, over the last couple of days, suspected drones coming from Yemen, potentially fired by Houthi rebels there, hit a number of targets inside Egypt on the border with Israel. And look, this is why the US has been sending aircraft carriers. We do understand that this second carrier is now sitting in the eastern Mediterranean. The US says it's not there as a provocation, it is there as a deterrent for any of these other regional players. We're talking here Iran, we're talking Syria, Hezbollah, to stop them from getting involved that could really see this spill over very, very badly.
Right, that's the fear. Sarah Coast live for us in Tel Aviv. Thank you so much, Sarah. Do take care and stay safe. Let's now go to our reporter, Joe Jashin. He is joining us from Sderot, Israel. Jashin, thank you for joining us. We do want to tell our viewers that we are still trying to reach out to our correspondents in Gaza, but unfortunately, Gaza is now experiencing a communication blackout. We weren't able to get to our correspondent there, but Jashin is there telling us about the situation where you are. Tell us about the latest.
Well, here at the front near the Gaza border, Sderot is now an empty host, I would say a ghost city. As you mentioned, we may now not in contact with nor our correspondent in Gaza, because here we can just imagine what the situation from that side could be, because through the whole morning till the afternoon, the constant strikes, air strikes from this side. Also, we also hear the sustained, small armed fires from this side. And now, as we have heard from the Israeli Defense Forces, say that now the military has expanded its ground operation. Previously, we saw those military enter Gaza and withdrew. But from last night, what we heard is that now the infantry, the combat engineering and also the armed forces now inside Gaza, what they are going to do is they want to try to install deployment there to try to see if there is the bombardment trap, as we also discussed about the Hamas underground infrastructure could be the threat. But now it's kind of like process of how Israeli people or how Israeli military wanted to respond to the October 7th attack. Now, the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that this is the way to beef up the pressure on Hamas. We know that there is a dual track efforts being going on, because once they get some negotiations leverage from the hostage conditions, because we now know from the IDF we have about 229 hostages are still in Gaza, but we are not sure quite sure about the number that Hamas now is holding. But the situation is that they hope that they can safely give back those hostages, but at the same time, once the negotiation fail, which is led now by Qatar, maybe the military or the ground operation could be going further to the Gaza city. And it's also a process about the military, tactics to know that if the underground networks of the, Hamas Bobby truck could, have some counter-offensive measures to make some threat to the military. Now, at the same time, we understand, this kind of the way that the government trying to convince the public that this is not delayed, because we've been seeing this operation since the October 7th, since the war. But we are not sure that, because the IDF hasn't specified this is the full one. But in the following days, as we see in the following couple of hours, we may see a further escalation of this exchange of fires. But one information that I wanted to share with you is that mostly, as our Tel Aviv correspondent said, we will have the red alerts from our phone, but today we heard less of that from this region, which means maybe the fires from the Hamas side or from the Gaza side now has been decreased. So we'll see, because for now, actually, IDF hasn't report any injuries from the Israeli side. Seems that the maneuver is now under the plan. So, but of course we cannot be here for such a long time, because we also have the warnings from the snipers, from the police, from the security. So I'll just end it here.
Yeah, what's so striking, Jashin, is that as you were speaking, we continue to hear these continuous and loud explosions, which are quite close to you. Do take shelter. Please stay safe, Jashin. It really speaks to how dangerous the situation is. Fast development there. We can go to our correspondent Noor Harazin in Gaza. It's a miracle that we can get to you this hour. Tell us about the latest. Israel expanding its operations. What's the situation on the ground?
The thing that is happening here is that we continuously hear heavy Israeli shelling on the eastern side of Gaza, eastern Al Buraish camp and eastern Deir al-Balah camp, and apparently there is an Israeli incursion and Israeli troops and they are clashing with Palestinian militants on the eastern side of Gaza. However, because of there is no connection in Gaza, there is no internet, no networks, nothing. We cannot call each other, we cannot go on the internet. We rarely get the information from other journalists who are close to the area. The latest that we got that there was an intensified Israeli strikes overnight and also this morning on the Gaza Strip, one airstrike or several airstrikes that struck the Al-Shati refugee camp, which is such a densely populated area. We're talking about refugee camp. Basically, thousands of families are living there just next to each other. This strike, and according to the Palestinian Health Ministry, more than 40 people were killed in that strike alone. Also, according to the Health Ministry, more than 7,300 people have been killed until now, because also there is no communication. Actually, whenever an Israeli strike happens, the people who are getting struck or injured, they come to the hospital either by feet. If they are lucky and they have a car and there is fuel inside the car, they come here to the hospital. They head to the hospitals, buy their cars, and then ask the ambulances inside the hospitals to head where the attack happened. And because of this hardship, we are having a big number of people who were killed and injured that are still under the rubble, and no one actually knows what happens to them, all due to the connections that were cut on Gaza.
Yeah, we have lost contact with you for several hours during the day. We are so good to see you okay, doing fine there. Tell us a bit more about the situation. You know, Israel says it will allow trucks carrying food, water, and medicine to enter southern Gaza today. Bring us up to speed with regard to that.
Well, the aid that is entering the Gaza Strip until now, it is not enough. People here on the ground, they do not feel any change. Hospitals do not feel any change, even though there is medicine and medical supplies with the aid. But what the hospitals really need is fuel to operate the sections like intensive care units and premature babies, and also to be able to operate on people who are injured, and also people here on the ground. They cannot feel any change because basically this is something that is still going on. There is a war on Gaza. More people are flooding the homes from northern Gaza to southern Gaza. More people coming to the hospitals. More people coming to the schools. So it is a continuous hardship. So the amount of aid that is entering the Gaza Strip is not enough to meet the needs of the people and what the people here on the ground are facing. According to the UN, they already distributed some of the food packages to Palestinians who are taking shelter in UN schools. They also delivered the flour to some of the bakeries to start producing bread, and they also filled the water tanks in some of the hospitals and some UN schools. However, as I said at the beginning, this aid that is entering the Gaza Strip is not enough for and to meet the needs of the hardships of the people here in Gaza.
Yeah, it's not nearly enough to turn the situation around. Thank you. Do stay safe. Please take shelter. Noor Harazin live for us in central Gaza there. The United Nations General Assembly has adopted a resolution that calls for a humanitarian truce in Gaza. It is the first UN response to the ongoing conflict, adopted with 120 votes in favor, 14 votes against, and 45 abstentions. The resolution calls for an immediate, durable, and sustained humanitarian truce leading to a cessation of hostilities. It demands the immediate, continuous, sufficient, and unhindered provision of essential goods and services to civilians throughout the Gaza Strip, including water, food, medical supplies, fuel, and electricity. Representatives of Palestine, Israel, and Egypt have weighed in during the UN General Assembly's emergency meeting on Gaza. Take a listen.
Vote to stop the killing. Vote for humanitarian aid to reach those whose very survival depends on it. Vote to stop this madness. You have a chance to do something. to give an important signal. Choose justice, not vengeance. Choose to defend the law, not justify its breach. Choose peace, not more wars. Vote to put an end to almost 3 weeks of the worst double standards we have seen in decades. To restore some credibility of this place and the rules it is supposed to embody. Do not miss this chance. Lives are hanging in the balance, and every life is sacred. Please save lives, save lives, save lives. Vote for our draft resolution, and I thank you.
Our goal is to completely eradicate Hamas's capabilities, and we will use every means at our disposal to accomplish this.
Silence is no longer an option. Enough is enough. We can no longer bear what is happening to the Palestinians. The required stance is clear and simple. It is no more than reaffirming the most basic human values, the most basic principles of international law, the most basic political and diplomatic norms in armed conflict.
Leaders from EU countries held their first face-to-face meeting since the conflict began on October 7th. They agreed to call for humanitarian pauses to allow aid to Gaza. Meanwhile, multiple pro-Palestinian demonstrations have been staged in the bloc. And our correspondent Evangelo Sipsas is joining me from London. Evangelo, thank you for joining us this hour. Now, protests have been organized to call for the UK government to withdraw its support for Israel. What can you tell us about this?
Well, as you can clearly see behind me, there's a large crowd of people. I'm just going to move on the side a little bit so you guys can see the amount of people that have gathered here today to condemn what is going on in the Gaza Strip, but also to try to put pressure on the UK government to stop its arming, as they say, Israel, and to withdraw from the conflict. Now, we see the crowd is quite angry because in the UN resolution, the United Kingdom abstained from vote for finding a resolution of a ceasefire in the Middle East between the conflict that is happening at the moment. And that resolution was for them to stop a ceasefire and create humanitarian aid routes that humanitarian aid can be safe traveled to the people who need it right now. Now, in that resolution on Friday, more than 120 countries agreed to to have a ceasefire and send humanitarian aid, while 14, including the US and Israel, said no, while the United Kingdom, Australia, Canada, India, and Germany abstained of vote. And that's why the people behind me are here. They're trying to put the pressure on to the UK government to stop what they're doing, arming, as they say, the Israeli government, but also Israel in general, and taking the side of them in the conflict in the Middle East. I'm just going to move a little bit back in front of the camera here so you guys can see me once again. There's a lot of people going by. It's quite big, and it's expected to be larger than the previous one, which from what we know now was close to 300,000 people.
Appreciate the latest. Evangelo Sipsas live for us in London. Thank you so much.
هم اجوا هلا من شوي من شي ساعتين اجوا قالوا لنا حطوا الطواقي كلها لازم
So here is a CGTN reporter Zhou Jiaxing live near the Gaza border. We're now seeing, as you saw, that heavy smoke coming out. near the areas of the Gaza border. We know that over the past night, the Israeli Defense Forces has announced the expansion of their ground incursion, a ground operation. Of course, the official nowadays are not kind of like in front of saying that this is the official one, but not in a fuller version of what they previously announced the ground operation. But the situation is totally different from what we observed the other day, because on Friday, I think on Tuesday night, that was the first one when the Israeli forces entered the Gaza Strip with troops on the ground, but then withdrew from that areas. But for last night, after the IDF announced the expansion, we saw a different deployment there. In terms of the level, we see that the infantry, the combat engineering, and also the armed forces now inside Gaza. That's what previously the IDF the defense minister Gallant said, that they wanted their soldiers to get inside to see Gaza. At the same time, we, through the whole morning till now, the local time here in Israel is 3 p.m. What we've heard is the constant explosions from that side, and also the barrage of outgoing rockets from this side. And we also heard, sustained small armed fires from that side. Previously, we also saw tanks. And this is definitely the way that Israeli forces wanted to move forward, because it's been like almost a week since they announced that they will delay, because there are some political calculations in terms of course, because now it is multiple front for Israel. From the northern border, we have Lebanon's Hezbollah. Also, we have some pressure from the other regional players, for example, like Iran. And also after the Biden visit to Israel, I think even Biden did not specifically say that he demanded Benjamin Netanyahu to pause these operations, but at the same time we see this is happening. But the situation on the ground would be different, because we know that there is the Hamas infrastructure. The Israeli forces wanted to target, wanted to wipe them out, want to wipe out the Hamas leadership. But we have a really sophisticated underground network. Previously, we had 2 Israeli hostages released from the Hamas side. From what lady told us that they had the underground tunnel. That could be the bobby trap for the Israeli forces. So that might be the thing that they are now considering if they wanted to move forward, because they have to be very careful by moving forward slowly. Just might be 100 meters or 500 meters away, but substantially we have the deployment there from the Israeli side. So just half an hour before, we actually saw the F-15 flights also above our head. And these days we've already seen some new military deployment in the region. But here in Sderot, also the neighboring communities have already been evacuated after this, the October 7th attack, because that is not the first time for the residents here in the region. But of course, they have to evacuate most of the residents here. We are talking about 4,000 residents in this region, in either northern border, southern Israel. Here we have residents now evacuated to, some would be evacuated to downtown Tel Aviv. Sorry. In our hotel, the hotel that we stayed, we also talked to some residents evacuated from this region. They said that they're okay, because they think that they have the shelter, they have this, at least they have the opportunities to be with their families. But now we still have, IDF said, about 229 hostages are being held in Gaza, but we are not quite sure about how many hostages now in the hand of Hamas. Now, situation is, this is like a dual track efforts, because we believe the Hamas is still they're waiting for the Israeli operation into Gaza, but at the same time, they understand this, how to, plan their, counteroffensive tactics, and so it could be like, if they wanted to, near the negotiations, which would be, quite ideal to, the war cabinet here. So they may withdraw, but if, this is a process of putting pressure to the other side, and then if they can, win some, leverage through negotiations, and that could be a different scenario. So now we know that Qatar-led negotiations is ongoing to try to save those hostages. So if it goes well, I think the IDF would try to slow that military operation. But at the same time, if no, because we are talking about Hamas said there could be a package in which that if they release all the hostages, including soldiers, we believe we have soldiers among those 229 hostages. If they release all of them, they are now requesting a 5-day ceasefire. But when the UN is now calling for a ceasefire after the 150 states voting for the resolution, it is yes, but the action could be very hard. When it comes to the ground operation, it is about, if it is embarrassing Benjamin Netanyahu, because, he declared on this war on Hamas, he wanted to, eradicate Hamas. But Hamas now is, even they have claimed they've killed overnight through the last night's military operation. They killed the area commander linked to the October 7th attacks. Also, they claim they killed the intelligence guy within Hamas. But still, these negotiations has been advocated by Israeli people. So in the downtown Kyiv, we also talked to some protesters who also other family members with those hostages, that they wanted to see Netanyahu to push the negotiations like what they did before President Swab, because they also have the Hamas leaders, or Hamas soldiers, or Hamas militants in their hand. So they wanted to try to reach this kind of deal. But if this goes well, that could be the situation. Now, as we can hear, that this is like the sustained small arm fires going on not far away. We can hear that clearly here. Yeah, as we said, that this is a situation for for the Israeli people who are so determined this time to support the government to eliminate Hamas, because they believe Hamas, they call Hamas terrorist groups. At the same time, this is also about the those hostages. They wanted to bring them back home safely. So they hope that the negotiations from the government, we've already now just have 5 hostages released, 2 Americans, even they're also dual nationals, Americans and Israelis, and we also have 2 released from the Gaza side. But we still have 220 more hostages. We have, accordingly, we have, IDF said we have, the kids, just like 3-year-old, if it is true. But yeah, they might be now still being held underground in a tunnel, according to Lady Shifshus, who was just released the other day, days before. So during the release, one thing is very interesting. I just wanted to share with you is that Miss Lifshitz, who is the 85-year-old lady, she has been supporting the peace between the two sides, between Palestinian and Israel relations. But at the same time, it was unfortunately the occasion, the scenario that we don't want to see, because she was abducted by Hamas. When she said goodbye to Hamas militants, she also said shalom. This is the first Israeli word that I learned since we arrived here 2 weeks ago. Shalom in Hebrew means hello and goodbye and also peace. So I hope that maybe deep in her mind, she was like treated well after some ups and downs. She was like treated with medics because they, according to her, Hamas had prepared these attacks, the surprise attack, for months. And one of the key messages she were asked to send to the public by Hamas is that this is the failure of the Israeli intelligence, and this is the mistake by the government. So even they issued the warnings like a month ago before the surprise attack, but the government did not prepare for this one. So now we can see just over there rising smokes from that side. So I'm not quite sure if you can see it clearly, if our cameraman can just zoom in a little bit. But just like not quite far away from the smoke, there is a band of sand which will lead to the Gaza border. So as I said, most of the residents here in this town have been evacuated. So these days, the only people we see here is, media friends, because so IDF has established a media center in the downtown here. But sometimes they would have some press conference. But I think the most important thing is that this is the way that we can we can see what's happening at the border. If I wanted to share my feelings about now, for me actually, you might hear the airstrikes, you might hear the explosions, you might hear the fires there, but I would say it's a little bit decreased compared with what we heard from this morning, because this morning when we arrived here, it was quite constant. Yeah, we've now received some red alerts from Ashkelon, which is to the south of Gaza Strip. So if we can just look a little bit down there, at the same time you would not imagine that, bordering Gaza, we have this small town where we still have these constructions underway, because during the wartime period, I don't think anyone want to live in such a closer distance to the Gaza. Because for most Israelis people, I think attacks from Gaza are not strange, but this is not what we would imagine. We can still see some villas and houses are now still under constructions, and not far away from me there, I can still see a playground. So I mean, if it is not about the October 7th, might be a peaceful time. We can see kids and their parents are playing in this area, enjoying this Saturday afternoon, which is also the Sabbath, the day that most of the Jewish people would just celebrate the holiday. So it's a tough time. Yeah. But what I learned from the local people is that the reason why for these border cities they still have this new houses, because interestingly we still talked to some Chinese engineer here, just two. They had about 500 Chinese constructors here for this compound, for this real estate here, but most of them have evacuated. Yeah, actually, I'm not quite sure about the building near the playground. It might be like to me, it's like a museum. It's like a museum. Yeah. But of course, the wartime situation will be different, so these constructions might be delayed. So for this, for our new audiences just tuning in, I'm now live near the Gaza border here in Israel. We wanted to show you this is a situation at the border where, the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, just announced that their military deployment inside Gaza. We might expect increased and more intense fire exchanges in the following days in the region. But we are not quite sure about how Hamas would make their counteroffensive measures to this new move. But of course, we are expecting some bobby trap that might be the the snag for the Israeli forces. They might get military operations slowly. But of course, they had the probe the other night. They just entered Gaza and they withdrew, and now from last night, more and more troops are getting with infantry and combat engineering, and also armed forces getting. So this is also I think it's a comprehensive and also military plan for the war continent. Of course, there is some difference between Benjamin Netanyahu's war cabinet and also the IDF. So mostly, I think the IDF would just evaluate the situation in Gaza if now is the right time to move forward or not. So they would just brief this situation to war cabinet, and the war cabinet would just approve. Okay, let's do this, or let's don't do this at the moment. So if we just wanted to see, this is of course not a local war. This is a regional war, as we see that Hezbollah in the Israel's northern border is now also irritating the Israeli forces. We have Hezbollah, backed by Iran. So that's the reason why in Syria and Iran and in some other Middle East countries now, the U.S. is trying to warn the regional players, try to warn them that if you wanted to go, I would just go after you. As you can hear, we have those sustained small arm fires going on there. It sounds to me very well trained, not like the amateur one. It's constant and sustained, right? So because of course we are not quite sure about the statistics about the Israeli side, because the IDF just said that there's no injuries since the overnight operations last night, which means that maybe the operation is now going well, and I don't know, maybe maybe they haven't yet moved to that kind of areas where we have the counteroffensive from Hamas. So of course, if this situation is what I predict, it could be a period for the deployment to move a little bit forward, and then ward slowly. Then so that's the reason why I think maybe tonight, as we discussed last night. So it just happened, without announcement. Of course, these days this military intelligence is really confidential, so we don't know. And but what we know and what we can hear is that they don't want this delay anymore, because this could be an embarrassing moment for the Israel, because they were so determined to wipe out Hamas leadership, and this is also the reason why they think that this is a way that try to convince Israeli people that we can safeguard Israeli people, because we are talking about 1,400 people during the surprise attack that was killed. So then we would, if this operation goes well, we are expecting the IDF could make some breach to into the area where the Hamas would substantially have those counteroffensive. So, and the other day also we took some pictures of that kind of. Wait a second. Yeah, it's a little bit blurred. I'm not quite sure that if the camera can take that for our audiences. It's a town in Gaza. So on the map, you may see that there is a long wall, which is about 40 miles, a 40 miles long wall of the Gaza Strip. That's the reason why it is called besieged enclave, or it is called open air prison. But not really. Not each mile will be seen as built for the war. So that's the reason why you can still see, those towns without walls. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I just wanted to wrap up for our audiences. So this is live CGTN Live for you at this is CGTN Live at the Gaza border. We are updating you what's going on. As we speak, we're hearing the sustained small armed fires going on there. But now it's I would say it's quite calmer compared to what we heard this morning, when we heard a constant outgoing rockets, the barrage of outgoing rockets from the Israeli side. So I think the Israeli forces have increased this military operations. As I said, that they have expanded these military operations. So now the thing is that they've already sent their troops inside, and we wanted to see what could be happening next. I think this will be very critical. Maybe, I don't know, maybe on Monday or Sunday, they will get more Hamas leaders on the list. But now we have, they claimed that there are several Hamas leaders being killed. But for Israeli forces, no injuries has been reported. Again, we have another round of smoke there behind that hill. That might be from the strikes from the Israeli side. So I will just leave you there. You can just leave your comments and also what you want to learn from the CGTN coverage on the Israel-Palestine conflict here. Bye for now.
Mohammed Boutros, head of the Department of Political Science at Helwan University in Cairo. Professor Boutros, thank you for joining us. Now, the vote at the UNGA is not binding, so does it have any impact at all?
Well, the Charter of the UN states as follows. The Security Council is the only council that has a binding decision, while the General Assembly is just a forum and the resolution is non-binding. Now, what's the use of it? I can say, according to the international law, that it can be used to refer later on in negotiation, refer to in negotiations. It also statement of right. It also rallies the public opinion, the global public opinion, and draw the conscience of the human beings to the atrocities of what's going on. Actually, if we refer back to 1967, there was a resolution from the Security Council that is supposed to be binding, but it was never applied to withdraw the occupying force, Israel, from the Palestinian occupied land in 1967, and never happened. So whether it's binding or non-binding, it does not apply in United Nations. That's why we also call for the UN absolute reform, comprehensive reform, because the World War II system is not applicable, is not viable anymore.
Now, you are in Cairo at the moment. How do people over there feel about the conflict?
Well, I don't need to repeat the feelings of the people. The feelings of the people, they are totally frustrated, and they have public anger, and no government, no political system would give a blind eye or ignore the sweeping anger among Egyptians. So they possess and put tremendous pressure on the government to act in a tougher way. That's why the tone of the Egyptian leader, President Sisi, has changed over time, and saying that if Israelis escalate, we are going to escalate too. And this is unprecedented press release by the leader of Egypt, who's known to be very patient.
Now, speaking of putting pressure on the government, a recent poll published in Israel shows that half of Israeli people want the government to hold off a ground offensive into Gaza. Do you think this will change anything?
Well, look at the extreme radical government that's ruling now, Netanyahu's cabinet. Netanyahu's cabinet includes terrorists, and even United States stopped dealing with two members of the Netanyahu's cabinet. I tell you something, Netanyahu does not give a lot of attention to the calls inside Israel, because his political career, his freedom is on stake. He is pursued and chased by the judiciary in Israel of corruption charges. So his political career is done with. He knows this. So what he's doing, he's trying to prolong the war, get as many actions as possible to show that he's capable of changing the route and course of action, in the hope that this will delay his prosecution, because eventually he will be prosecuted. Not only in Israel, he will be prosecuted for the war crimes he committed against humanity.
Now, do you think we are looking at a possible wider regional conflict?
Well, no one wants a wider and comprehensive regional war, especially Israel, because they cannot fight in four fronts. So what I'm saying is that they try to ask the U.S. with its leverage, political leverage, to pressure Iran not to trigger a war in the Lebanese front. Also, he knows very well that Egypt and Jordan have peace deals with peace accords. So what's going on now is the problem with Iran. So Iran can trigger the Houthis in Yemen. They can trigger the Hezbollah in Lebanon to wage a war as a proxy war. I don't think Iran would be involved in a direct war with Israel. So it will incite its allies in Lebanon and Yemen to wage the war against Israel. And let's wait and see.
Professor Botros, thank you very much for your time and your perspectives. Our top story this hour. Gaza loses all communications as Israel's attacks on the Palestinian enclave enter its fourth week. Hamas vows that its fighters are ready to confront Israeli attacks. It says its fighters are clashing with Israeli troops in areas near the border. Israel's military says its air and ground forces have widened their attacks on Hamas, targeting tunnels and infrastructure. Gaza's local telecommunication firms say internet and mobile phone services have been cut off in Gaza due to intensive strikes. The World Health Organization and the Palestinian Red Crescent Society say they have completely lost contact with their operations and ground teams in Gaza. Hamas says a ceasefire is required for the release of hostages in Gaza. The Palestinian Health Ministry says over 7,300 people have been killed since Israel began its airstrikes on October 7th. Israel's death toll stands at over 1,400. Associated Press correspondent Sam Metnick reports from Jerusalem.
Attacks greatly escalated on Friday, with Israel intensifying its bombing campaign over Gaza. Earlier Friday evening, the Israeli military said that it was expanding its activities over Gaza. This is in anticipation of a full-scale ground invasion. The Palestinian telecommunications company said that there were no communications and no internet in Gaza due to the Israeli attacks. During the evening on Friday, a source told the Associated Press that they could hear and see continuous bombing and shelling as well as gunfire in Gaza. This took place after a day of airstrikes. A 14-year-old boy and his father were killed in Gaza at a mosque during Friday prayers. Israel also continued its ground raids into Gaza for the second day in a row, again ahead of this expected full-scale invasion. Also on Friday, there were shots fired from Gaza into Israel, more than 1,000 rockets. At least one hit a residential building in Tel Aviv, injuring several people. Meanwhile, there are still more than 200 hostages in Gaza. It's unclear as to the state of what is happening with them. Qatar is supposed to be negotiating, but with this increased offensive by Israel, it's unclear if the talks are continuing or what the status is. So far, there have been 4 women that have been released, 2 elderly Israeli women and 2 American women, a mother and daughter, American-Israeli nationalities. As this conflict continues, there are concerns that it is going to expand regionally. The United States said on Friday that it hit several targets in eastern Syria. They said that this was because of attacks on its U.S. forces by what they called Iranian-backed fighters. The United States said that there have been 16 attacks on its bases and its fighters within the last 10 days, injuring more than 20 people. This is in Iraq and Syria. Sam Mednick with the Associated Press for CGTN in Jerusalem.
Hundreds of thousands of residents in the Gaza Strip have been displaced, with schools and hospitals being transformed into shelters. Noha Razin reports from Gaza.
I'm standing in one of the shelters, one school that hundreds of Palestinian families took shelter inside it. And actually, the people do not feel safe if they stayed in their homes or if they took shelter in a hospital or they took shelter in a school, because we've witnessed previous Israeli attacks on schools and also hospitals and mosques and churches. So people do not feel safe no matter where they are, but they're doing what they can to at least feel safe. Also, in Hamas's latest statement, they said that at least 50 of the people that were captured back in October the 7th have died during, have been killed during Israel's attacks on the Gaza Strip. So this is also giving the Palestinians here the sense of no one is actually safe in Gaza if they are civilians, militants, if they are Palestinians, foreigners, Israelis. As long as you are inside the Gaza Strip, you are not safe.
Occur in such situations. There are thousands of cases of acute respiratory infections, around more than 7,000 respiratory infections, mainly among children. There are thousands of cases of diarrhea, acute watery diarrhea, approximately 3,000. Again, particularly happening in children below 5 years. And we all know what sort of risk and danger that sort of disease will bring to children, especially if there is a lack of healthcare services. There are hundreds of cases of scabies and lice, which almost never heard in Palestine and in Gaza, despite the fact of the shortages, despite the fact of the lack of basic infrastructures. There is a report of outbreak of chickenpox, which is now considered as an endemic in Gaza, despite the fact that Palestinian health system in general, but definitely in Gaza, the immunization system is one of the best here in the region. So there is huge risk of spreading infections that will definitely threaten the public health. The first top, out of these 5 is we call all, conflicting hostile parties to stop ceasefire. We ask everyone to secure safety of the civilians. Number 2, secure safety of the healthcare facilities and those people working in these healthcare facilities, as well as the patients and their relatives, as well as those who are sheltering in the healthcare facilities. Number 3, make sure that we provide continuous, uninterrupted, sustainable supplies of basic, essential life needs like water, food, fuel, as well as medical supplies, non-stop, all the time, with no interruption at all. People there are really very much suffering. The suffering is beyond our imaginations. Hospitals are reaching 150% beyond their capacity. In addition to the shortage of supplies, medical supplies and water. Because of the shortage of fuel, some hospitals, in fact, started closing their services. There are around 1,000 people who are depending on renal dialysis. They will lose that sort of service. And some of them have lost that service, in fact, due to unavailability of fuel. There are around 130 neonates, infants, under incubators. There is a similar number under ICUs. There is around 52,000 pregnant ladies. 5.5 thousand are expected to deliver next month, with around 180 deliveries a day. They are going to lose that sort of service because of lack of fuel.
Talking about the world not being perfect, we have a situation, unfortunately and tragically, in the Middle East, the escalation of conflict between Palestine and Israel. Can you elaborate on the position of the United Nations on this latest round of escalation and the tragic death of civilians?
Well, the Secretary General speaks for the United Nations, and he has said that he has spoken out very strongly on this humanitarian situation in Gaza. For the United Nations values civilian life among all others, and for us it's very important that we are able to get those humanitarian supplies into Gaza. We have very brave and courageous staff on the ground working to be able to get those supplies once they come in. The United Nations is about peace, and the Secretary General has been calling for peace and for relief for the humanitarian situation. All of our energy now is directed towards that, and the Secretary General, as you know, was in Egypt. He went to the crossing at Rafah to see this humanitarian situation there. He's back in New York, and no doubt he's also working behind the scenes on some of the political issues.
يعني نحن الآن بجوار حاضن، الحاضن هذا فيه طفلة، الطفلة هاي يعني كانت والدتها حامل، تم قصف المبنى، للأسف ربنا اصطفاها شهيدة بجواره، لكن الحمد لله وصلت إلى الاستقبال. الأطباء الجراحة تعاملوا معها بحرفية عالية وتم استخلاص الطفلة وتم عمل الإنعاش الوليدي المناسب لها. الآن الطفلة وضعها من متوسط إلى جيد، لكن بأي حال من الأحوال نحن نتكلم عن قسم حضانة. هذا القسم يعني بحاجة ماسة جدا إلى الكهرباء. الكهرباء هنا يتم يعني الحصول عليها من الطاقة الكهربائية الناتجة عن المولدات بسبب انقطاع الكهرباء من شركة الكهرباء الإسرائيلية ومن محطة الكهرباء. الحواضن هاي حتقف. إذا وقفت هذه الحواضن هذا يعني توقف أجهزة التنفس الصناعي التي تعمل على الكهرباء، وبالتالي شهادة إعدام لكل الأطفال الموجودين في قسم الحضانة. والله الأعداد كبيرة والقصص مأساوية. هم الناجون الوحيدين فقط من أسرهم.